For half a century, the machinery of pop music has churned with myths, rumors, and half-truths, but few bands have guarded their inner sanctum as fiercely as ABBA. While the world sang along to the euphoric choruses of Dancing Queen and the heartbreaking laments of The Winner Takes It All, the four Swedish musicians who created those anthems remain frustratingly opaque. They were by design a paradox, four distinct individuals who merged into a single shimmering superentity. Yet, within that unit, one member has always been the quiet engine, the architectural genius behind the piano. Benny Andersson, now 78, has spent a lifetime letting the music do the talking. He has deflected interview questions about his personal life with polite grunts, changed the subject when asked about the band's internal fractures, and refused to publish a memoir. But recently, in a series of intimate conversations leading up to the 3rd anniversary of the ABBA Voyage hologram residency in London, Benny finally lowered his guard. He confirmed a truth that fans have speculated about for decades, a truth not about the band's breakup, nor about the money, but about her. About the woman who shaped the second half of his life, and about the quiet, devastating reason he never publicly defended himself against a rumor that painted him as the villain of ABBA's story. To understand what Benny Andersson finally confirmed, one must first erase the simplistic narrative that has dominated tabloids since 1981. That narrative is easy to recite. ABBA was two happy couples, Bjorn and Agnetha, Benny and Freda. When the marriages failed, the band died, and when Benny left his wife, Annie Freda Lingstad, for a younger woman named Mona Nerklet, he became the stoic, almost cold architect of the band's demise. The press painted him as a man who traded love for logistics, swapping a fiery redhead for a blonde TV journalist. For 40 years, Benny never corrected this story. He let the world believe he had simply fallen out of love and moved on. But at 78, sitting in his studio on the island of Skepsholmen in Stockholm, surrounded by vintage keyboards and the scent of old paper, he revealed a different, far more complex truth. The narrative was wrong, he said quietly, his deep voice carrying the weight of decades. It wasn't about leaving one person for another. It was about realizing too late that the person I was losing was the only one who ever truly heard the silence between the notes. The her in the title is not Freda, as most journalists have long assumed. It is, in fact, Mona Nerklet, the woman he married in November 1981, just months after his divorce from Freda was finalized. For years, fans vilified Mona as the other woman, the homewrecker who shattered ABBA's fairy tale. But Benny's recent confirmation flips that script entirely. He admits now that his relationship with Mona began not as a passionate affair, but as an emotional rescue mission. "I was drowning," he confessed. "ABBA was a pressure cooker. We were selling 100 million records, but inside, I was hollow. Freda and I weren't fighting, we were ghosts sharing a house. I would sit at the piano for 14 hours, and when I stopped, there was nothing left for anyone. Mona didn't break us. She found the pieces." This revelation, that his second marriage was a response to burnout and existential loneliness, not a betrayal, recontextualizes everything about ABBA's final years. The cold, analytical Benny that the world saw was actually a man experiencing a quiet breakdown, using a new relationship as a lifeboat while the old one sank. The original sin of Benny Andersson's public image was his silence. During the release of ABBA's most emotionally devastating album, The Visitors 1981, critics and fans alike listened to tracks like When All Is Said and Done and One of Us, and assumed they were listening to a diary of his divorce from Freda. The assumption was logical. Freda sang Let On, When All Is Said and Done, a song about a woman picking up the pieces after a man leaves. It was assumed that Bjorn Ulvaeus, the lyricist, had written a thinly veiled attack on his bandmate and friend. But Benny now confirms the truth. Those songs were not about him leaving Freda. They were about the death of the band itself. Bjorn wrote those words looking at all four of us, Benny explains. The her in those songs isn't Freda, it's ABBA. We were singing a eulogy to ourselves, and no one realized it. He admits that during the recording of The Visitors, He and Freda had already emotionally separated, but they maintained a professional respect that was almost superhuman. They would go into the studio, create magic, and then go home to separate lives. The truth, Benny says, is that he never stopped loving Freda as a creative partner. The romantic love faded, but the musical love, the ability to look at her across a microphone and know exactly what note she was going to sing, never died. That, he argues, is the real tragedy of ABBA. Not that two couples broke up, but that the world demanded a soap opera, so they performed one, hiding the fact that they were actually grieving the end of their own collective youth. One of the most startling admissions Benny makes at 78 concerns the song, "The Winner Takes It All." For decades, Agnetha Fältskog has been asked if it was hard to sing a song written by her ex-husband Björn about their divorce. She always said it wasn't personal, but no one believed her. Now, Benny confirms that Agnetha was telling the truth. "That song is not about Björn and Agnetha," he states flatly. "Björn wrote it. I wrote the music. It was about us, about the band, about the fear that when you win everything, fame, fortune, global adoration, you lose the right to be human. The her in that song is success itself. Success is a cruel lover. It takes everything and leaves you alone in a hotel room in Tokyo at 3 a.m., wondering why you feel nothing." This reframing is explosive. It suggests that the four members of ABBA were trapped in a gilded cage, performing their own pain as entertainment, while the public projected romantic dramas onto them that were only half real. Benny admits that he never corrected this myth, because it was easier to let people believe in a simple story of heartbreak than to explain the complex, boring truth of creative burnout. The second her that Benny finally addresses is perhaps the most surprising. His mother, Lulu. Born in 1946, to a construction worker and a mother who ran a small shop, Benny was a quiet child who found solace in the accordion. His father, Gista, was a strict man who wanted Benny to have a trade, but his mother, Lulu, was the one who secretly paid for his piano lessons, who hid his rock and roll records from his father, and who, when Benny dropped out of school at 15 to play in dance bands, told him, "If you fail, you come home, but you won't fail." Benny reveals that for the last 10 years, he has been haunted by a specific memory from 1974, the night ABBA won the Eurovision Song Contest with Waterloo. He called home from Brighton, England to speak to his mother. His father answered and said, "She's already in bed. She'll read about it in the paper." Benny never got to hear her voice that night. 3 years later, Lulu died of cancer, just as ABBA was becoming a global phenomenon. "I carry that guilt," he admits. "I was so busy becoming a star that I didn't insist. I didn't say, 'Wake her up.' I let my father's practicality silence the one person who believed in me first." The truth he confirms is that his entire post-ABBA career, the musicals, the folk albums, the refusal to sell the band's catalog to the highest bidder, has been an attempt to prove something to a woman who never got to see the view from the top. "Every time I sit at the piano, I play for her," he says. "Not for the fans, not for the money, for Lulu." This revelation about his mother explains why Benny Andersson has always seemed so disconnected from the nostalgia industry. While other legacy acts tour relentlessly and license their music to every car commercial, Benny has been famously difficult. He turned down a reported $1 billion to reunite ABBA for a tour in the early 2000s. He refused to allow a hologram tour for years until the technology was perfect. He rarely gives interviews. He now admits that this stubbornness was a form of grief. "If I had taken that money and gone on tour in 2002, it would have been a lie," he says. "My mother wasn't there to see it. Freda and I weren't friends yet. The joy was gone. I couldn't fake the joy." The her in his silence for decades was the ghost of authenticity. He refused to cheapen what ABBA had built because the woman who taught him to love music, his mother, was not a commodity. She was a woman who worked behind a counter, who had calloused hands, who listened to him play the same wrong chord 100 times without flinching. To sell ABBA like a brand felt like a betrayal of her memory. Of course, the question of Freda cannot be avoided. Benny's relationship with his ex-wife and bandmate is the central mystery of ABBA's later years. For decades, they barely spoke. They attended the premiere of Mamma Mia. Different days. They recorded Voyage 2021 in separate studios, sending files digitally. The press assumed there was still bad blood, but Benny now confirms a different, more adult truth. The silence was respect. We didn't speak because we didn't need to, he explains. When you have made music with someone for 20 years, you don't need small talk. We would see each other and nod. That nod meant, I see you. I remember. I forgive you. I forgive myself. He admits that for the first 5 years after their divorce, he was terrified of Freda. Not of her anger, but of her sadness. He knew he had hurt her, not by leaving, but by moving on so quickly. Mona was my lifeline, he says. But Freda was my history. You cannot apologize for surviving, but you can carry the weight. The breakthrough came in 2016, when they were forced to meet to discuss the Voyage project. They sat in a room, just the two of them, for the first time in 35 years. According to Benny, Freda looked at him and said, "Are we too old to pretend we don't love each other?" He clarifies, "Not romantic love. That was long gone. But the love of soldiers who survived a war. The love of two people who created something that will outlive them. That love is real, and we finally admitted it." This leads to the final her that Benny confirms at age 78. The mysterious, unnamed woman who inspired the song Like an Angel Passing Through My Room, the haunting closing track on The Visitors. For 40 years, fans have speculated that it was about a ghost, a lost child, or a secret lover. Benny now reveals that it was about a woman he saw once on a train platform in 1980 at the lowest point of his life. He was traveling alone from Stockholm to Gothenburg, trying to write and failing. He saw a woman in a red coat, waiting for a train in the opposite direction. She was crying. He never spoke to her. He never saw her face clearly. But in that moment, he felt a profound connection, a recognition of shared sorrow. That song is about the strangers who save you without knowing it, he says. That woman had no idea that her tears gave me permission to cry. I went home and wrote that melody in 20 minutes. It was the first honest thing I had written in years. The truth he confirms is that ABBA's greatest moments of emotional depth did not come from the band's internal dramas. They came from the periphery, from a mother's sacrifice, a stranger's grief, a quiet understanding between two divorced bandmates. The her, in ABBA's story, is not a single person. It is the collective feminine energy that held the band together. Lulu's belief, Freda's resilience, Mona's rescue, and the anonymous woman in the red coat, who reminded him that pain is universal. At 78, Benny Andersson is not interested in revenge, nor in setting the record straight for the sake of his legacy. He is interested in peace. He confirms this truth, not as a confession, but as a gift to the fans who have stuck with ABBA through 5 decades of silence. You wanted to know who she was, he says, referencing the endless online forums that have parsed every lyric. She was all of us. She was the fear, the hope, the exhaustion, the joy. ABBA was never just 4 people. It was a conversation between 4 very broken, very lucky humans and the world. And the world was the her all along. As the ABBA Voyage show continues to sell out in London, with its digital avatars frozen in their 1970s prime, the real Benny Andersson sits in his studio, an old man finally unburdened. He plays a chord. He smiles. He nods to the empty room, and for the first time in 40 years, he lets the silence speak for itself.